Welcome, everybody, to Try This First, the series where I talk to fundraising and nonprofit experts about their expertise and to try to get some advice about how to get things started so we don't wait for things to be perfect. We actually get going, start raising those funds, start engaging the community. And today, we want to talk about leadership. Specifically, I want to talk about leading a fundraising team. If you're new to leadership, or new to the fundraising world, it can be challenging and maybe a little intimidating to lead a fundraising effort. And so my guest today is LaVal Brewer from South County Outreach. He is, in my opinion, a fantastic nonprofit leader and has great experience in leading fundraising teams. He's going to be self-effacing. I'm not going to let him do it. He's a great leader. And I brought him on this call so he can answer the question, LaVal, if someone is just starting out, they've got a fundraising team. Maybe they're not sure how to lead fundraising efforts. What should they try first? Oh,
Well, I'm going to take it from a new leader's perspective, not the executive or CEO.
great.
That's typically a little bit harder.
Yeah.
So the first thing you got to try out is you got to try out your leadership. So if you're going to lead a fundraising team, you have to be ready to lead. That's the hardest thing. It's actually managing your own self, managing your expectations, managing the result that you've been given with this fundraising team. That's first.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to manage people, and most people know how, but they actually don't, you got to try leading.
Yeah.
That's it.
Great. Good call.
Now we obviously let's go deeper. Let's go deeper.
Let's dig a little bit.
So what does that mean? Leadership requires a level of trust within the organization. So trust from your supervisor, trust for the people that your colleagues, so your programmatic colleagues, your finance colleagues, your administrative colleagues, and your team. So creating and developing trust so that when you ask or when they ask you, they know that you're going to follow through, and you can expect that they will follow through on the things that they're going to do. That's all the way around. So you got to be able to get into the arena and create relationships so that you have good trust. Try that first.
I love that. I love that. And it's so important because relationship building is at the core of successful fundraising, and it's at the core of leading a fundraising effort too. You have to have authentic, clear relationships with your team.
Without it, you're going to get off. You're going to get off with a bad start. You're going to expect that someone on your team can do something that they can't, and you haven't had a clear understanding of whether they can or not. You maybe miss out on the team member who can do more, and you just haven't recognized that because maybe people say, "Oh, that person, yeah," but maybe under the previous leader or maybe where they are, they didn't have the ability to thrive and live into their potential seat. So all of those things are critically important because if you don't have that trust, then you can't get to results. And as we know, with fundraising, there is the most measurable results in an organization next to finances.
Yeah. 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 It's real clear. It's real
clear. The program team could miss serving people by a percentage. The fundraising team doesn't have that luxury. They don't have that luxury of missing by a large percentage.
Yeah. And that's a good segue. Talk to me about goal setting, because obviously when you're leading a fundraising team, you're setting those expectations, you're helping them build those goals. The fundraising goal is the clearest one, but what are some other goals or metrics you like to use to track kind of the effectiveness of your team?
So first of all, just to be clear about that, let's talk about this because that number or numbers with the dollar signs next to them tend to loom large as it relates to the goals. That's the wrong goal. That's a target.
Yeah, okay.
Right, that's a target. That's a target you got to get to. And yes, you got to make there. But the goals are the things that you have to do along the line in order for you actually to have success to get to that target. So what are some of the goals? Well, one, let's be really clear about where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be really clear about what we are going to do. In other words, what type of activities are we going to do? Are we going to ask individuals for money? Are we going to Work on better grant submission? Is it going to be more collaboration with the program team so we have a better understanding of what deliverables might be? Um, is it going to be understanding what everyone's daily tasks are and weekly and monthly tasks? Basically, develop a development plan early on.
Okay. Yeah.
Even if it's small and unsophisticated, you need to have a clear development plan that is not just financial numbers, but actions, people, activities. That is critical to your success. Because if you can't point back to, we said we're going to identify X number of people. We looked for those people in this place. We connected with those people. We
Hmm.
invited them into conversations. We asked them for money.
Yeah.
Right. It's not, hi, give me money. That
Yeah,
can
that
work.
doesn't work. That doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Yeah, and that sequence you laid out is actually really kind of like the heart of it, right? Like it's you find the people, you cultivate those relationships, you get them to a point, you invite them in. And that's really where I've seen kind of the difference between really strong and really weak fundraising leaders is the weak ones really want to skip to the end of, well, you have to get this much money, so who have you asked today? But the reality is you people have to be ready. You can't just, like you said, hello, my name is, please give me money. You can't just dive in like that. That won't be successful. Um, I was always when I was leading a team at Habitat, my team and I would spend a lot of time talking about meetings as a metric, like the number of face-to-face substantive conversations you're having with donors or potential donors. I always found that to be a pretty good way to track the day-to-day work that the team members were doing and to hold myself accountable as well. Is that something you've seen in your experience?
Well, look, if so, I'm gonna try not to offend anyone. Um, that's really something I try to do. But
Please, let's take that as read that we're not trying to offend anyone
we're
today.
not trying to offend anyone. But my iPhone is a great fundraising tool until it isn't. So
Unpack that. Yeah.
what I mean by that is if you're not standing next to somebody on a regular basis, next to people,
Hmm.
if you don't have if you don't have lunches in your development budget, coffees in your development budget, happy hour drinks in your development budget, then and we know that donors and board members often pay, but if you need to have that money in the budget because you need to sit down with people and get to know them. Your
Yes.
your best donor is not going to just take your new development person and just say, "Yeah, I'm going to keep giving to you."
Right.
They're going to build a relationship with you, and hopefully that relationship was built before you got there. But it's not just that; it's looking at the lower level numbers and the entry level gifts and the first gifts. If you're not having those one touch points, which are calls and letters, but face to face, hey, I'd love to give you a tour. I'd love to sit down and get to know you better. I'd love to learn more about you personally.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You miss.
Yeah. Learn about you is such an important role that the fundraising team has to play is to not only because it's not just your time to pitch the company to pitch the mission, it's to really to listen. What is this person's um philanthropic priorities? What are the things that move them that they care about? That's such, and you can't get that on the first call, right? That's not a cold call conversation. You
It's
got to
not,
build that trust.
not, and donor acquisition tools don't give you all the answers.
Right. Right. Yeah. Nothing. Yeah. So building trust internally, I love that. I do want to circle back to that. Building trust not only amongst the fundraising team, but amongst the other stakeholders and leaders in the organization. That's all absolutely critical. Like, uh, whether it's a programs team or the finance team, all those, we all have to trust one another. So that's a huge leadership kind of calling right there. And
Mhm.
then tell me a little bit about leading or managing upwards, if you're leading a fundraising team and maybe you're reporting up to an executive director or maybe reporting up to a board, what are some of the things you should keep in mind as you kind of explore those waters?
Well, you want to know that you want to lead up, manage up early.
Hmm.
And what I mean by, and we all have the understanding of what managing up, and some of us may look at it differently. But I'll be very clear: if my development director of development, CDO, doesn't understand what I think about fundraising, what my board thinks about fundraising, what we think about time management, what do we think about results, then you're flying blind.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're flying blind. And it's your responsibility to come to me, and my responsibility, of course, to be with you, but to come and say, help me understand what you're thinking. What are you expecting? What brings you joy, and what should I never do?
Yeah.
Like,
Good. Yeah.
what should I never do? And then believe them.
Hmm.
I mean, believe them. If your executive director says, "Yeah, I don't want to have meetings with you," I'm going to believe him or her. And at that very moment, I'm going to go, "How am I going to figure out how to have meetings with you? Because I need you to go on some fundraising visits with me, and we need
Yeah.
to prepare ahead of time."
Hmm.
So that level of connecting, managing up, managing sideways, it's really important. The last thing you need is some program person who feels like they're overworked and thinks it's your job to raise them more money so they can do their work. And if you haven't raised the money, it's their fault. It's your fault that they aren't getting the things done. You better have a good relationship with that person.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's such it's such a team sport, but every now and again, I think fundraisers only wave the team sport flag when things are going poorly, because I think a lot of fundraisers and a lot of fundraising leaders who maybe don't realize they do this, they get all the credit when the check comes in, right? Like, oh, look what I
Lots,
raised.
lots of praise, tons of
Oh,
praise.
oh yeah. But when it doesn't come in, then it's like, well, it's a team effort. We're all in this together. And you really have to maintain that balance all along. Like any gift that comes in is maybe you as the fundraiser asked the question, but it's the net effect of that donor's experiences with the organization, from programming to the website to the person answering the phone to anything, that all leads to their conversation or their decision to make that gift. So we got to be careful about that. I want to jump back on trust real quick, because another element of trust that's, I think, unique to fundraising leadership is, and I just posted about this on LinkedIn, that I had an executive director who was really confused and really disappointed that he didn't see the fundraising team at their cubicles from 9 to 5 every day. And that was a real problem. That was something he really struggled with. And I think that's a trust issue, right? Like, if you've got a
Mhm.
fundraising team, you might not see them all day, right? How do you set that expectations for a team when you're, in a leadership role?
So that's a balancing act,
Yeah.
because we all want to see our team members at some point in time. We want to lay eyes on them. As
Right.
as as leaders, we want to lay eyes on people. Sometimes we just want to walk in their office and just chat for a couple of seconds, or walk in their office and ask questions,
Yeah.
good and bad. But yeah, if your team is in the office every day, all day long, then they're not doing that thing we talked about, which is standing next to donors and getting relationships with them,
Hmm.
which is hard. So at the beginning, if you're developing a brand new team, you're developing a brand new fundraising strategy, and they haven't done anything, yeah. At the beginning, yes, be in the office, be connected, and then communicate, communicate where you are going.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, where are you going? Why are you doing that? I'll give you another example, Christian. You know this better than most. There are times when my grant writer needs peace and quiet.
Hmm.
Right. I used to work at this company called Playworks. It's a national nonprofit that works with elementary schools, and it was a raucous group. I mean, literally balls would be bouncing down the hall. People would be playing games in the workroom. Lunch was loud. Everything was loud. right? Everything's loud. I remember one day my grant writer's like, I can't get anything done. I looked at her and I said, you need to work from home the whole week
Yeah.
because she had a really busy week to get things done because I knew what she was working on. I'm like,
Hmm.
you need to just go home, work from home. Don't show up here. I actually don't want to see you here. Work from wherever you need to so you get the peace and quiet so you can concentrate on what was a really big grant for us. And it
Yeah.
wasn't a new grant, it was a reoccurring grant, but it was a leveling up grant. So it required a lot of attention and focus. Um, you got to be able to, as a leader like myself or like you or someone else, you got to be able to give that grace. But on the second time, you've got to be able to communicate, hey, I need some peace and quiet, and this is not the place for me to do that.
Hmm. Yeah. And that's so important because it also shows that A, you as the leader have to have that flexibility to be able to like, oh, this is what this team member needs. I'm going to make an adjustment this way or that way. And you also have to have a build a culture where your team members can come to you and say, I need some peace and quiet. I need to change my work schedule or whatever. Um, and they have to feel safe that they can do that, right? They can't feel like, oh, they're going to yell at me if I do that. And I think
Yeah.
we've all worked for yellers before. It's always a horrible place. So which and that all kind of like leads to like team culture, right? That's another critical element of being leading a fundraising team is developing that culture. I've heard some people still like the phrase the culture of philanthropy. I've heard the culture of generosity, whatever it is. What are some of the methods that you use to help build culture when you're leading a team?
So leading by example is number one. So I can't say let's all work together and then not work together.
Right.
Me.
Yeah.
Like me. Um, I also will hold my team members accountable to the same thing. So instead of just saying, hey, we all work together, if I see that a team member is not doing that, I'm going to call them out on that early.
Hmm.
This is what we all agreed to. And when I say agreed, it's written down. In this case,
Yeah.
it's written
Yeah.
down. This is what we all agreed to. You're not there, and I need to help you get there because if you don't get there, you're these things are going to happen.
Hmm.
And you and I've worked in it long enough to where I can see what's going to happen. But I think that the biggest thing about culture as organizations is I think what we really are talking about is we want everyone to have a cohesive working environment where everyone is able to get their work done
Yeah.
within the time frame that they've been given for it without
Yes.
a level of stress that drives everyone crazy, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to say it. I mean, there's going to be stress. The job is stressful. If it was easy, they wouldn't need us. But we have to be protecting our team members so they're not, don't take it home. Don't work through the weekend every weekend. And if your nonprofit's success is predicated on staff members working, 12-hour days and the weekends, I think your nonprofit's in trouble. And it's just a matter of time before it collapses, right? I mean,
Not to mention, and I know that this isn't what we're talking about. Burnout on this team is high.
yeah, yeah,
It's really
it
high,
is.
and the last thing you want to do is burn someone out at the last thing you want to do is have someone burn out at the wrong time
Hmm.
because there's very little safety net built into most teams as it relates to development.
And there's also, I mean, leadership, the team leadership plays a really important role when it comes to that burnout identification and avoidance. Even small things like um, really holding your team accountable for taking their PTO, right? We all know there's some people who are like, oh, I don't know, take it. It's your time. Take the time. We're going to be okay. It's going to be all right when you're gone for a week. When you come back, we'll get back to it. Like that, even little things like that, I think can help guard against that like martyr syndrome that leads to burnout.
Yeah. On top of that, Chris, the PTO is an interesting conversation. The it can't work without me. And if you say that to me as me as a CEO, I stop right away and go, help me understand why.
Yeah.
Like, what why are you saying that? And this is where I'm going to be critical. You better have the right answer. You better
Yeah.
in
I
this
mean,
one. This one, you better have the right answer. And it can't be, oh, I'm the only one. Because at that point in time, I'm freaked out.
Right.
For me, I am freaked out. I'm like, oh, okay, that's not good because if you leave, if I get rid of you, if something goes wrong, I'm in trouble.
Right. Right. We can't have anybody having all the keys to the kingdom. Like they need to that also avoid that's another way to guard against burnout, right? Like
Yeah.
if you feel like you're the only one that does this one thing, then you're going to feel maybe you'll feel compelled to stay or to work when you're sick or to come in when you're sick or all that stuff. Like no, we have to each share a load here. That's really important. Interesting. So, if you're a new leader, your advice at the top was like kind of like start leading, like really think about understand your own self. That's a huge component of leadership is that kind of like self-awareness. Are there any tools or resources that you've used or advised others to use to kind of help in that journey?
Yeah, depending on the size of the team, Chris,
Uh-huh.
there are different types of tools I would recommend. And some of them are inexpensive and some of them have a little bit of cost to them. The first is Myers Briggs.
Yeah.
Understand your behaviors. Understand how you react, how you feel, how you make decisions, and if possible, understand how the rest of your team does that same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So understand that's a little more expensive. Myers Briggs costs a little bit of money. I would say it's not too expensive if we're a larger organization. A really inexpensive tool for understanding your team and you is Patrick Lencioni, the table groups. Um, uh, oh my God, the six behaviors. It's not six
Okay.
behaviors. Um, Working Genius. Sorry,
Okay. There it is. Working genius.
Working Genius. Forgive me. So Working Genius, which when I did it the first time, and I had a team member on my team that had this Working Genius called Wonder, and in Wonder, they wonder a lot.
Uh-huh.
Like I wonder if we were so they spend a lot of time wondering. And I am not a wanderer. I am a like, let's go.
Get it done. Yeah.
Let's get it. Like we've made the decision. Yeah, okay, go. And that person was still wondering, right? And I was like, that I had to stop and go, why am I so upset with this person? And I realized I'm like, oh, okay. So I need to nudge that person through wonder, right? I
Yes.
need I need to I need to nudge them through wonder. They have the ability to get it done. So it's just nudging them through wonder. That's two. The third, super simple. Know your strengths. Strengths Finder
Yeah.
is buy the book, it's 20 something bucks. Take the test in the back, the quiz in the back, and understand what your five strengths are. And then believe the strengths and then lean into those strengths. Lean
Yes.
into those strengths.
Yes.
Um, when you know your whole team in those either those three platforms or maybe there are others, then you can start putting people in the right seat, which I think is really critical for development. It, if you're going to have someone who's great, I'll step back. We both know Tim Shaw,
Mm-hmm.
wonderful fundraiser, wonderful leader. And I remember him saying when he was at Think Together, he had a team member who was incredible at writing grants, incredible at writing grants, but they were spending most of their time actually reporting
Mm.
the less the smaller portion of that grant writer's job. And he's like, this person has a great success record. They know exactly what they can get done. They have the strength. And he's like, but this is slowing them down. Hired a team member to take on the reporting. Then that person who was writing grants had more time to think and write and grow the organization. You can use a tool to figure that out to
Yeah.
understand if someone has a strength in X and another person has a strength in Y. Move people around. Forget about the titles. Move people around, get people in the right seat, doing the right things at their strengths, and then you're going to have some success.
Absolutely. Yeah, and those assessments, the like whether it's Myers-Briggs or Enneagram or DISC or whatever it is, I really I've taken a million of those, and I it's so important because we all fall into the trap of assuming that our thought process and our approach to a problem is shared by our colleagues. And those assessments really help you figure out, and it's not a right or wrong, this one's good, this way's bad. It's just really understanding how people think through a thing, how they address a problem, how they respond to a stress situation. And once you start to know that, yeah, then you can put the people in the right seat and you can start, maybe that changes how you communicate to your team members. I was at an organization and I knew the controller was super sharp, but really process oriented and really detail oriented and needed time. So before I made a big announcement about like a funding opportunity, if there was a financial element to it, she got that notification like a week early.
Mm.
And I would say, hey, this is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm thinking about. Let's look for problems at it. And gave her a chance to really understand it and digest it. And then when the larger announcement would go out, she was already on board. So again, it wasn't about right or wrong. I knew she needed more time than I did to process this kind of stuff. So you got to make that adjustment. You can't do a one size fits all approach to your leadership, especially in something as emotional and as complex, really, as fundraising. You really have
Yeah.
to be
You
really
point
clear.
on something there, Chris, and it's communication.
Yeah.
There is in this side line of business, there are two positions that have to over communicate. The leader of the organization, the executive CEO, whatever the title is, they've got to
Hmm.
over communicate.
Definitely.
Repeat themselves, repeat themselves, repeat themselves, repeat themselves. Development people have to also over communicate, not necessarily repeat themselves, but they need to communicate. They cannot surprise people. They cannot hold things close to their vest and say, well, I'm working on this, but I don't want you to know about it yet because I'm not sure.
Yep.
Like, no, communicate that this is what we're working on and we're not sure what's going to happen with it, but this is where we are. And communicate between teams,
Hmm.
because the last thing you need is a funder showing up at one of your program sites. Your program person didn't know they were coming, weren't prepared.
Oh,
For,
man.
for,
Yeah.
Forget how the place looks. That's not the point, because lived in spaces in nonprofits, I believe, are good. I actually believe lived in nonprofit spaces are good.
Yeah. You're
I
doing the work. It's going to look like a
doing the work.
workshop. Yeah.
It should not be pristine and crystal clean, and everyone's dressed like they're going to church on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
It should be lived in. It should be
Yeah.
an experience. It could be loud, all those things. But you have to communicate ahead of time so that the program person doesn't go, oh my God, you're bringing a big funder here. And they clear the place of all the opportunity.
Right. Right. Or they don't know the funder's coming and they're not prepared. I mean, yeah, it's absolutely communicates so much, especially when it comes to bringing people in, bringing volunteers in, bringing donors or potential donors. Um, yeah, that's a huge element. And it
And
all
then,
goes back, it all goes back to building that culture of trust. Like your
yep.
program team needs to trust that when your fundraisers are bringing someone through, they're not going to just turn them loose. They're going to kind of guide them through. They're going to, okay, we're going to stop here and ask for questions, and then we're going to get out of your hair. Like it's not a free for all, and that only comes with trust. So,
And then to go on the finance side, when you're not going to make a deadline, in other words, the check is not showing up when you thought it was going to show up,
mhm.
but talk about it early.
Yeah,
like, I'm working on it. I talk about it, follow up with the finance team. Hey, the check is on its way, but it's not going to get here by this date. I've made the phone call. I know it's coming. I've turned in all the paperwork required for that.
yeah, yeah,
Be don't just celebrate when the money comes in early and is bigger than what you expected. Like, communicate. We budgeted for X. It's not X. It's Y. It's smaller, and it's coming in early or it's coming in late. But the last thing you need your finance person to be doing is forecasting to the top leadership and the board, and then suddenly you've got this delta that you had no way of explaining, and the finance person has only one of two things to do. They can go, "Yep, we missed it. We're going to work on it. We're there." They're going to own that pressure, or they're going to go, "I had no clue.
yeah,
I didn't know."
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a huge point. Get that communication going.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say about leading a fundraising team, I'm interested to hear your thought about this. When I first was given the responsibility of working with a large fundraising team, I I struggled with two things. One was um, fundraising is often, as you know, it's a long-term process under which we are held accountable to short-term goals. So I was really kind of like, how much do I get into the weeds on budget and big stuff? And how I landed was like, okay, once a month we're going to look at budget, but pretty much the rest of the time, go build relationships, go do that. The other thing that was a challenge for me was I thought I was being kinder to my team by phrasing a lot of things as questions that I didn't really mean to be questions.
Mm.
Like, what do you think if we do X, Y, Z? And one of my team members pulled me aside one day and said, "This isn't working. Like, if you want us to do X, Y, Z, we'll do it. But you have to tell us, hey, I want to do X, Y, Z, and then we'll do it. Don't make it a debate if it's not really a debate." And that really kind of opened my eyes when I was new. I was like, oh yeah, I'm not being a bad guy by saying this is my and it becomes part of my leadership. Part of my leadership is to make a decision and proceed. So that helped me out. Were there other when you were starting this journey of being a leader, were there other kind of like aha moments or things you learned early on that you still stick with you?
Yeah, I have a tendency to give people lots of grace,
Hmm.
and there are times when you can give people grace, and there are times when you cannot, and you need to be really clear about which ones are which.
Yeah.
So if it like if it needs to be done by a certain date, it needs to be done by a certain date. And if you trust the person to get to that date, then great. But if you have some concerns, you need to be touch point to the point to where you're feeling like you're micromanaging, but you're actually just making sure that we
Hmm.
get there.
Hmm.
And there are times when you have to micromanage, like, oh no, we're focused on this, and I'm focused on this with you. And there's times like, dude, just get it done. Just
Right.
get it done.
Right. Or there's times where you're the best thing you can do as a leader is to give people permission to delay other things,
Yeah.
or to say, I'm going to take this off your plate. Don't go to that meeting. I'll go for you. I need you on this tack, and this is really what where you're gonna succeed today. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would also just say radical candor. Um,
Radical candor. I love that.
it's a book. It's called Radical Candor. And the way I look at it is that I need to sit down and tell you when things are going well. And I also need to be really, and this is hard for new leaders. You need to know how to tell someone, hey, you're not making it.
Yeah.
It's not happening. And you are going to need to figure out how to get it there. Well, and they start asking you questions like, not this time. I need you to figure out what you need to do because I don't have the time to do that right
Hmm.
now. But also be really clear. We have to get here. Like we're getting there.
Yeah.
And we're going there now. And this is opposite of what we talked about earlier around culture. Yeah, we're working through the weekend to get it done. Right?
Sometimes.
Sometimes we're working through the weekend to get it done. And then sometimes like you've been working through the weekend to get it done for 4 months now. Maybe you need to try something different.
Yeah. 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 Maybe that's not, maybe the pace isn't the problem. Maybe it's the activity itself or our approach to it. Yeah, that's a good point. Excellent. So what a lot of great things in this conversation today, and I think if you're out there and trying to figure out, what to try first, think, focusing on learning about your leadership style, really getting comfortable with that, and really emphasizing trust. I think trust came up 4 or 5 times in our conversation, not only within the fundraising team, but within the organization, up, down, and sideways. Like there has to be that trust. And one of the ways we build trust is by being authentic, by being clear, by being open with people. And I'll also note that at no point in this call did anybody say it's a family. That's kind of, I think, an outdated leadership framework, because it's
Mhm.
not. But we can care for each other and be in community around this mission together without like pulling that emotional lever and being like, oh, we're family, because you can't fire your family. So
It's hard to
people
fire your family. Yeah.
hard to fire your family, very hard to do. So, LaVal, tell us a little bit about what's going on these days with your organization and how people can learn more or maybe even get involved.
Well, thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. South County Outreach is a hunger and homeless prevention organization here in South Orange County. We are trying really hard, and I do mean trying really hard because we haven't succeeded at preventing hunger and homelessness yet.
Mhm.
I cannot wait for the day where one of our organizations actually solve this problem, this riddle, because the pain and suffering that comes from being hungry or not having a place to call home is nothing that any American should be going through. So if people want to help us and join us in that fight, and that not that fight, join us in that endeavor. I'm trying to reduce my battle language.
Me too. It's
Yeah,
tough to, it's a tough habit to break, but
it's
yeah.
tough. It is tough, but I'm getting there because I correct myself whenever I do it.
Hmm.
Join us in that endeavor. Just reach out to us on our website at www.sco-oc.org. I said that way too fast. South County Outreach. It'll show up.
You'll find it. You'll find
You'll
it.
find us. You'll find us.
Excellent.
And
Excellent. Well,
the other thing I do is I
oh,
hang out with cool people like you and talk about development and fundraising and people and leadership, and just brings me joy to be able to learn more from you all at the same time.
I love that. I love it. And this was great. I really appreciate you taking the time to share some of your experience. I love hearing your point of view on leadership stuff, not only because I agree with you a lot, but because it's always good to hear from you and good for this stuff. So if you're out there, you're watching this, you're thinking about getting started, you need to get started leading, take a look at yourself, build that trust, try this first, and I think you're going to get some great results. So I think we'll end it there. Thanks again, LaVal, and I will talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.
Did everybody